start. I'm Councillor Tom Bennett. I'm one of the Vice Chairman of the Planning Applications Committee, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. To my right are my fellow councillors. I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Duncan.
Emma Dencode, Councillor in Golborne.
Councillor Malcolm Spalling for Earls Court Ward.
Councillor Janet Evans, Courtfield Ward.
Councillor Hamish Adurian, Earls Court Ward.
Thanks very much, and it'll be the five of us who are making the decisions on the cases this evening. To my left are the officers who will be presenting the cases. The officer team is led tonight by Lisa Chung, and we're also joined by Derek Taylor and Alison Long. If any other officers need to speak, I'll introduce them at the time. So we'll start with apologies for absence. I assume there are no apologies for absence. Looks like we're all here. Are there any declarations of interest from members of the committee? Councillor Spalling.
Chairman, the last item on the South Pack is 38 to 42, 38 to 40 Pennywell Road.
Yeah.
I have met the developer on site.
Yeah.
And discussed his application, and I'm also registered as an objector.
Yeah.
So for that, with your permission, I will recuse myself from the committee and go and sit in the room somewhere else.
Yep. That's no problem. I don't know. I don't know if you need to move, but you certainly can't speak. But if you prefer to move and sit elsewhere in the room, then that's absolutely fine. Yes, Councillor Evans.
143 Gloucester Road is in my ward, but I have not had any discussions about it, and I'm open-minded.
Okay, fantastic.
If I may, Chair, I suppose in the same vein, I should declare that the Pennywell Road one is also in my ward, but I have not had any discussion around it.
Okay, no problem. And are there any other declarations other than declarations of interest? No. Is everyone on the committee happy that I sign off the minutes from the last meeting, which were circulated earlier? Yep, agreed. Okay. Before we start, I'll just quickly run through the order in which we'll be considering the applications tonight. We're going to start with 1 Derry Street, which is the only one we have from the north of the borough, and then in the south we're going to start with Park Cottage, 143 Gloucester Road, 7 Beena Gardens, the Sandhills on Limerston Street, and finally 38 to 40 Pennywell Road. Right, I think that's it in way of introduction. So if we proceed straight away to 1 Derry Street, Mr. Taylor, I think you're presenting that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this is an application under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act to amend the existing planning permission. So you'll have seen, obviously, from the reports that planning permission was granted on appeal last year, and then this is a proposal basically to tweak that planning permission in a number of ways. Excuse me. So the first slide I thought I'd show you shows the application site in the red line. So you'll see that it's a curiously shaped site. It sort of wraps itself around the gardens on the west side of Kensington Square. And it's accessed from Kensington Square, which is sort of part of the focus, I think, of the applications and the representations you've seen. That's a view within the existing courtyard, so that's looking sort of roughly southwards towards the building that you see at the back of the photograph. On the left-hand side, you can just see some gardens of Kensington Square just appearing in the photograph. And that's an image, an artist's image of what the north elevation or the front elevation would look like. You'll see that there's a new doorway and a canopy in front of it. Those photographs just show the existing sort of conditions, or pre-existing last year, actually. I think these are last year's photographs, which show the sort of the service yard and then the entrance to it in the bottom right. And then that image shows the existing entrance to the service yard from Kensington Square in the top part of it, and then the bottom is the artist's impression of the new entrance from Kensington Square. Important to note there that there's the formation of a completely new pedestrian gate on the left-hand side of the image, of the lower image. And this, I thought, was just useful to remind anyone of the route that the new pedestrian path would take, where it sort of wraps around the rear of the gardens to Kensington Square. And one of the controversial features in the appeal last year was the fact that the path sort of nibbles away at the rear of the garden to one of the Kensington Square properties. You can see that roughly in the centre of the image. That's the consented, or that's the planning permission granted on appeal, showing that the route of the path in the appeal scheme. And then that image shows a number of minor changes to that. So that the route of the path, that's last year's one, granted on appeal, and that's proposed. The route of the path basically hasn't changed. All that changes is a number of features along the perimeter of the path, where they've introduced a couple of benches that you see in the centre of the image, and then planters planting troughs, as they're described, sort of lining the forecourt and other parts of it. I think at that point I'll point out that there's something that I accidentally omitted from the addendum report, which is that the description of development has now been amended by the deletion of one aspect of it, which is that the description of development that you see in the report before you includes the replacement of cycle stands with fixed tables and stools, and that there was a proposal at one point to introduce some stools or tables within the forecourt in front of the building. And I think a number of the representations obviously focus on that, but that part of it has actually now been dropped, and that there are no tables or stools included in it. So the amended description is as you have in the report in front of you, but deleting the words "replace cycle stands with fixed tables and stools." As you can see from that diagram, that the forecourt area simply has planters in it and no fixed tables or stools. Moving sort of within the building, the appeal planning permission included quite a large parking area at the lower level, and the single largest element, I think, of this proposal is now to move the cycle parking within there, and you can see that to the left of the image in the light brown colour, and then the sort of dark blue in the middle would now be changing facilities for staff. So you've got the staff changing facilities adjacent to the cycle parking. That would make sense. There was a loss of car parking in doing that, but the highways team are quite pleased that there's a loss of on-site commuter parking, so there's no planning objection to that. And then if you look at the lower level of that shows where the car park has been reduced in size, and then the cycle store, cycle parking and changing area introduced next to it. And then that image just shows the lower level in more detail. You can see there's a new fire screen to the reception above, and new escape doors. So those are relatively small changes to the scheme granted on appeal. And that's the last slide, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now proceed to hear from the objectors and applicants. Starting with objectors, we're joined by one objector this evening, Rayhan Suna. You here? Hello. You have 3 minutes to speak, and then once the applicant's also spoken, the committee will then have the opportunity to ask you questions, or ask both of you questions. So if you just give me 1 second, I'll get my timer up, and I'll let you know when your 3 minutes are up. So whenever you're ready. Sorry, the newest version of the site map.
Yeah, the drawing that I'm showing now, I think is PL 109P3, which is the latest site plan drawing.
Okay.
Is this a drawing that you would like up, or the more zoomed in one?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I almost know by heart by now, since the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
But I would like the members of the committee also see, because I will keep referring to it.
Yeah.
You see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we've also got it in our pack, so we can
Right.
refer to it as that. So
Right.
whenever you're ready.
So shall I start now?
Yes, please do.
Well, my name is Hanson, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'm here for two reasons. One of them is on the request of the chairman of our Residents Association and our hardworking honorary secretary, who both were unable to attend because of certain conflicts of schedules. And their request is that I should reiterate very briefly the feelings and thoughts of the residents. So I'm going to do that briefly. And the second reason is more personal, and it is to try to describe to you the plight of the next house and the house that's closest to the proposed works, and which rarely got any mention, but even though it's another Grade 2 heritage asset. So, but I also would like to start by saying that the residents' objectives have always been made with best intentions, and with the areas and its environs, and indeed the applicants' area, wishing them all the best. So we're working very hard. But the problem we're experiencing is that this terribly long process, I mean, we're all amateurs, we're lay people, while even for the last 10 days, we read nearly 200 documents. It's been so many, and this has been going on for so long. And also, for instance, this appeared, this recent thing, only 24 hours ago, on the website anyway, and it was revised only 10 days ago, and the residents did not have a chance to consider it or respond to it. And I mean, their concern about the thing that's in a way patronizingly referred as tables and stools is that they've been accused of being, you know, narrow-minded and overly conservative and so on, while their issue is the safety of their homes, because they see some danger in their positioning for the safety and security of their properties. The other thing is that the complaints have been focused on the over-intensity of the commercial activity dominating a public road, Dairy Street, and the public footpaths, and causing noise and pollution. And so there's the feeling that the self-reference and self-imposed 250 employee capacity is incompatible with the overall character of the site, especially its access and egress particulars.
Sorry, we've gone a little bit over time, so if you could just wrap up quickly.
Have I finished my 3 minutes?
Yes, it was 3.5 minutes. So if you, if you're happy to wrap up quickly, and then we'll be able to ask you questions as well.
Okay, then ask me questions. Maybe that's better.
Okay. So you happy to leave it there, and then we'll ask you questions.
Well, I mean, I couldn't mention the fact that I'm supporting the officers, inspectors' views summarized in the paragraphs from 30 to 33 about the approach should be taken for regularizing the heights of the proposed walls, which would be by considering the flattening the ground level of the lands there. But just ask me questions. I think it will be better that way.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that.
That's okay. It's easily done. No problem. So we now move over. Are we joined by Mr. Bender or Mr. Miles?
Thomas Bender, good evening.
Mr. Bender. So you also have 3 minutes. Ms. Sooner went over a bit, so if you'd like to go over a little bit as well, that won't be an issue. But yeah, if you keep it under 4 minutes, that would be much appreciated. When you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm ready, and here we go. As we heard, there's a previously approved planning application which established the rearrangement of the service yard and the new safe pedestrian route from the gate at Derry Street to the main entrance of number 1. This application now is for minor changes, as we have heard previously. The benches and tables that were discussed previously are not part of the scheme anymore. There was also mentioning of a gym on the plans. This is not certain at the moment, as this depends on the occupier requirements if one actually comes forward. It will occupy a very small area, and it will be limited in scope and ancillary to the main office use. It's also in the same use class as an office, and so would not require planning permission. Such a facility would not be open to the public and only used by the employees arriving by bicycle at number 1 Derry Street. The proposed changes have the support from the Council's planning officers. And just to remind ourselves, the service yard and non-residential activities behind Kensington Square were established more than 100 years ago and have been part of the overall character of the area ever since. The proposed changes now allow the building to be occupied again and provide employment space, thereby making a significant contribution to the supply of office stock in the borough in a highly accessible location next to a tube station. And the improvements to number 1 Derry Street and the new landscape design along the service yard will also enhance visual amenity and make a positive contribution to the surrounding area. The current design has been informed by consultation with residents, including a discussion in November with the Kensington Square Residents Association, to ensure that the ongoing use of number 1 does not affect the quality of the adjoining properties in the conservation area. For this reason, for example, a second planning application for changes to the roof has been withdrawn. The scheme now comprises a new access-controlled pedestrian gate at Derry Street at the front and a gate where the walkway meets the service yard. To answer security concerns by residents, the gate at Derry Street will remain shut at all times. Access will be by fob card only, and visitors have to pre-book access or inform reception on arrival. The second gate will be operated by the person supervising the service yard in case there's lorry movements, and then the gate is locked. So in summary, the proposed minor changes do not impact on the setting of the conservation area, nor of any of the listed buildings around the site, as already identified in the planning approval. There will be no adverse impact on the amenity of neighbours arising from these minor proposals. The changes remain largely invisible from Derry Street and Kensington Square, but the positive impact of the updated security provisions will be tangible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to questions from the committee. Councillor Evans.
I have a question for Mrs. Sooner, if I may. Can you speak into the microphone, please? Can you please tell us at what time of day there is actual disturbance and what time of day do you feel you anticipate that there could be problems? I'd like to hear, what actually is happening and what you perceive might be happening in future.
It is the danger posed by the arriving lorries and noise caused by out-of-hours visitors, and also people expect fear, rather, that once the pedestrian path is opened, there will be a huge queue and pressure on the pavements for people waiting to get in and, carrying their bikes a long distance from the entry point to the actual storage area devised for them. So, there is a fear, and the existing thing is that it's difficult to make a general comment about it because at the moment there are also a lot of works going on in the yard. There's some building work, so it is temporary, but it is hard to predict what's going to happen once this system, if it gets accepted and put into operation. But there are fears, and I'd say some of them are rather realistic. I don't think people are exaggerating, especially the houses near their street entrance. They think it's very noisy and very crowded because they feel this building being developed used to be a depot for a retail concern. Now it's being turned into office space serving to 250 people, and with bikes and access details and everything, it's hard to predict, and the reports say that the employers and the visitors will prefer to use the Derry Street entrance rather than the route from the tube station. So there will be a lot of pressure on that particular area. And it's not compatible with the size and the other use on the service yard, because it also serves as the delivery and collection point of some retail interests. Marks and Spencer, to name the major one.
Thank you very much, I understand.
It's very, very busy.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I've got some questions for Mr. Bender because I've been going through it, and the plan, you can't actually see the plans that well because they're so tiny. Maybe it's just my eyesight, but anyway, I just want for clarification. So you have said there's a lot of car parking. Does that mean there's no car parking at all under the building now? It's only cycle parking, or is it a reduction in car parking?
I think it's a reduction in car parking, but predominantly cycle parking.
A reduction in car park. I can't hear you very well.
A reduction in car parking, but there are some car parking spaces left in the basement.
So a reduction from what to what?
That figure I don't have with me at the moment. Sorry.
Sorry?
I don't have that figure right here with me. Apologies.
You don't know how many? Okay. So currently there is no car parking, and now there will be some car parking. Is that correct?
Now, there's car parking in the basement at the moment in the appeal decision, and that is reduced by introducing more cycle facilities in the basement.
Okay, so it is now currently used as a car park down in the basement, is it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So also, I think I heard you saying something about the roofs. Is that relating to the balconies? Because there was a lot of concern about balconies and overlooking and what they would be used for. With, if they aren't going to be using tables and chairs, it was clearly a concern of the residents there who'll be backing onto people's, leisure space or whatever. What's the situation with the balconies and the concerns about overlooking? I thought were absolutely legitimate.
The terrace which was used for employees is facing away from the residence towards the train line, and there were some small amendments suggested for that. That has been withdrawn, also with the idea of adding photovoltaic to make the building more sustainable, and that needs to be considered in more detail.
I can't hear you very well. You had to speak a little bit closer. This room eats up sound. You could speak a little bit closer. Sorry. So what you're saying that the other terrace.
The roof terraces are facing away from Kensington Square and the gardens.
Yes.
They're facing towards the train line and the train station, the underground station. So there's not that much of an overlooking issue anyway. There were little changes suggested. That planning application has been withdrawn. There will be photovoltaic added to the building, and that needs to be considered in full detail to make the building more sustainable.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a couple more, if that's all right, Chair. There was something about the height of the walls, and I'm not actually sure which walls you meant. Is this the walls, presumably historic walls at the bottom of people's gardens, or is this just the amendment that is going to be done mysteriously to the garden, which is going to be commercialised, or whatever's going to happen to it? Could you talk me through the walls, please? Because there was concern about walls and height of walls.
Me or?
For security.
Is that question to the applicant, Mr. Bender?
Oh, yes, it is. Sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Bender, yeah. I'll have a quick one for Mrs. Rimmer soon after.
Currently we propose, well, in this planning application we're proposing trellises, which are anti-climb trellises along the service yard wall, so we don't really touch the wall.
Okay. Okay, I think I've got all this. Could I have a quick one with Mrs. Suna, please? Yeah. So some of the things, I've read through all the objections, Mrs. Suna, and there are some which, maybe not much can be done about. Obviously, the number of people coming from not many at all to 250 is a concern. And given that the benches have been removed now, I think, and that the balcony has been removed, what is the main concern of residents now? Is it just the over-densification of that use of that site?
Well, vis-a-vis the current troughs and the previous tables and seats, was that they were so close to the garden walls, people could easily
Absolutely.
stand
So
on them
that
and
has now
jump
been
over.
removed,
Yeah.
I think, if
Yeah.
that's what, So that has now been removed. So what is the main concern now?
The main concern, this just appeared yesterday on the
I understand.
website, so people did not have a chance to reflect, but they probably are going to say the same thing, because they just stressed against the garden walls, and, they still give you the height, if you're tall and fit enough to enter any garden.
Okay. I'll check out with that with the
Yeah.
officers in a bit. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Spalling.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a question for Ms. Suna. If the tables and chairs have been removed so that people can't use them to climb over the wall, I noticed you were worried, you're at number 32, so your garden wall backs onto this site. Some of the walls are only 1 metre high. Two questions. Do you know that both the police, the crime prevention officer at the police, and also the council, we have a community safety officer who's an expert, they will both come free to you to advise you about security of your wall. And then if you took their advice, it would be a very good idea if you could discuss with the applicants about how you're going to have mutual security. Because I don't know who owns the wall, we don't look at that in planning, but we do encourage people to talk. And you might come up with a solution between you about they want their yard to be secure and you want your garden to be secure. So you could both agree on something outside of this meeting. Are you aware of that?
Yes and no. I guess the other option is that to keep the things as they were before, because the people also saw this as overdevelopment of a small site. I mean, in one hand, the complaint is that the service area is too small for a large building like that, and then the overly busy design approach for it. So, because there's also an attractive roof development, so for employees, for people, there's enough open air for area to spend their lunch breaks. I mean, there is that facility, so people are genuinely concerned why these tables and stools, and once they're gone, the troughs, which are of considerable height. So, I mean, why? It's just not understood very well. But the heights, the wall heights I've been talking about is on an entirely different matter. And I mean, if you bear with me, I would like to talk about that as well. But if I'm, you know, talking too much, I'll just not continue. It's.
Thank you for that answer. I also had a question for the applicant. Presumably you want your yard to be secure. Not having seen the original application, there's been no change of use of the yard, but as far as I can see, you want to put a pathway in, probably because of health and safety at work, and you want to separate the pedestrians from the delivery lorries. But in doing that, you might, outside this meeting, talk to your neighbours and see if there's some mutual advantage in security both sides. Had that occurred to you?
Thank you very much. Well, yes, that's absolutely right. The idea behind these works is to separate the activities in the service yard with the lorries delivering and supplying the big stores on Kensington High Street from the pedestrians, the employees arriving at One Dairy Street, and there's now a very clear, safe distinction between the two. And I think what in the previous application was not fully explored was how the gates function. That's why we already had the discussions with the Kensington Square Residents Association to explore with them where the problems are, and that's where the fob was introduced, and the fact that you can only open the front gate with a fob, because obviously the employer wants to keep, as you said, the area safe as well. They don't want intruders doing all sorts of things in this pathway towards the main entrance. And of course, thank you for the suggestion. We will explore that further and yeah, hopefully find a solution that works for both sides.
Any other questions? No. In which case, we thank you both very much for your time. We'll now move on to the part of the meeting where the committee get to ask questions of officers. Does anyone have any questions? Oh yeah, Councillor Evans.
Yes, I wanted to know how much the officers have taken into account the feeling that security is being breached by that the residents are feeling that the security is being hampered. Has that been taken into account?
Yes, certainly. I think security was one of the key considerations in the appeal. So the inspector obviously gave weight to security considerations, and officers gave weight to security considerations, but before the inspector did. In the case of this Section 73 application, again, security is clearly a key consideration. I think it's you know, the desire of residents and the concern of residents you know, to have sort of good security is completely understandable. I think in town planning terms, a balance obviously has to be struck where As you've touched on, I mean, the yard is a shared area between not just this office business, but also the rear of 99 to 121 Kensington High Street. So it's a busy service yard. I think all the people who operate through the yard obviously have their own vested interests in security, as do the residents, and clearly a conversation needs to be undertaken there. But I think in town planning terms, the proposals, as we see in the planning permission and included in this application, are actually an enhancement in terms of security. I mean, for a start, I mean, it's obviously much better to have a busy office building than an empty office building in terms of security. I think comparing the old office building that's now obviously ceased use and then the one that's now proposed, I'd see a number of enhancements there in terms of security. So I think the fine-tuning of that probably should be a conversation between the applicants and those who use the yard. But in town planning terms, I mean, it's a key consideration, but it's one where I don't think there's a town planning objection there.
Yes,
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few clarifications, Mr. Taylor. I've got, there were some questions I asked, and I'm still not really quite sure about them. So the walls that they're concerned about, the walls at the end of their garden, from the photographs, they look about 2 metres tall. I thought I heard someone say they were 1 metre, and I don't understand what they're talking about with the concern with the walls, because they are already quite high. And if they're going to have terraces or something, I didn't understand what was being proposed there. Perhaps you could clarify for me.
I mean, I don't have measurements for the garden walls. I think that there are walls at about 2 metres. I think some of them might be lower. Obviously, there are individual properties that run around the boundary. So there are a number of separate ownerships. I mean, I don't think it's within the applicant's gift to raise the height of walls. And the snag there is that the walls are listed, so I'm not entirely sure if they could simply be raised. I mean, obviously that would require an application for listed building consent.
Okay, but the applicant said something about putting a trellis. I don't know whether he meant just by the entrance to the site. I wasn't quite sure what he said.
The applicants are proposing anti-climb trellises along sort of their side of the wall in several places. I mean, an anti-climb trellis, by definition, is something that you can't climb.
No, I understand. So what is the extent of the... I'm just wondering if that actually, because it hasn't been explained very clearly, would satisfy the concerns of residents about security. But because I didn't understand what the answer was, I'm not quite up to speed with that.
Well, I think an anti-climb trellis is one mechanism.
No, I understand, but the height of the anti-climb terraces.
I don't know how high they'd be. I mean, one option would be if you wanted detail of the trellises, they could be added to condition 9. That's already requiring different details to be submitted.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a couple of others, if you don't mind. So, from what I understood, the extension of the balconies for having a breakout time or whatever, that is not now happening. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so they are as they are now, but with
Yes.
250 people potentially having access at least. Okay, and so in the previous, I think I was on the previous application, so the change, I'm a bit worried about the change of use for the bottom of the garden. Has that already been dealt with? Has that been agreed? Because that surely is it's being commercialised.
There's no change of use included with this application. All the change of use aspects were embedded in the appeals scheme.
Okay.
So planning permission for the use of the land, if you like, has all been granted.
Okay.
And there's no change to that at all.
Okay, and the benches and stools are definitely going. They're definitely
They're definitely not in the application at all.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks.
Just picking up on the question you asked earlier, in terms of the parking spaces, I think you were just asking for numbers, and there were 24 car parking spaces included in the appeal permission, and it's now proposed to drop those to 13. And so 24 spaces is actually an over-provision in terms of our transportation policies. And that's why the highways team are quite happy to see the number go down to 13.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No, in which case we'll proceed to a vote. I think I'll just say very quickly that Mrs. Suna has represented very well the concerns of the local residents, many of them genuine, but many of them pertain, I think, to wider issues or perhaps the original application. This committee, of course, turned down the original application, but it was overturned on appeal. So on planning terms, as we focus on what's being applied for today, which is actually really quite minor changes, I'm not sure we can find any planning issue with these changes, my personal view. And even if we were to turn down today's planning application, I'm not sure that would really go to the heart of the concerns that have been raised today. But there was also a useful suggestion and discussion around security and how both sides might be able to work together to find some mutual solutions on security. So hopefully that will be useful. Anyway, we'll proceed to a vote. The recommendation is to grant. Councillor, yes, sorry.
Can I just say that the proposal that we're agreeing does actually have the wrong wording in it, because it says replacing cycle stands with fixed tables, and now that's not happening. So, I mean, how do we accommodate that? Because I don't want to agree something which is incorrect.
So I think presumably record that in the minutes that is changing.
Yes, exactly so. So that's the reason I've sort of read out the deletion quite clearly for the minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to be double sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the other issue about the height of the trellis, which seems to be the main issue of concern, I think, can we condition that? What can we insist upon?
I think the trellises, you said condition 9 already provides some conditions around the trellises, is that right?
No, I was saying condition 9 is requiring details of 5 different elements of the proposal. And I was saying if the committee wished, we could obviously add a 6th one, which would be details of the height and detail of the trellises.
Can we say details that would to be discussed with residents to their satisfaction or something like that? I just think obviously that's a concern.
I mean,
Can we add that?
All the items in the condition are capable of being commented on by residents whilst we're considering them.
Okay.
So residents would have an opportunity then to comment on the height of the trellis or the form of the trellis.
Okay.
And they can speak to the crime prevention officer at the same time. And
Okay.
Okay, well let's add details of trellises to condition 9 then.
Thank you.
Could I say something?
All right,
here?
I'm very sorry. We have to, I would love to let you speak again, but we have to be careful to stick to the procedure, otherwise the whole process can be sort of appealed on procedural grounds. So I apologise, but we can't let you speak any further. Sorry about that.
Okay, apart from those 2 issues, I'm content to support it.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Spalling.
Chairman, just very briefly, the way I'm thinking, we're always told to balance any harm against public benefit. And that's how we make decisions. And in this case, there's potentially a little bit of harm, but I think dropping the car parking spaces down from 24 to 13 will discourage car use by employees.
Yeah.
And also, they're going to insert changing shower rooms and cycle stores in the basement. And I think this is the way the whole of business is developing in this borough, that we're dropping the use of carbon-fueled motor vehicles and going more to cycling. And I think that's a huge public benefit.
Yeah.
And also, of course, the protection of the employees from the use of the yard by introducing the pathway, which is probably something the company's got to do to protect their employees. Otherwise, they're at risk of some kind of employment, health and safety issues. So I think that's another benefit.
Well, I think the pathway they've already got planning for.
Yes.
I think certainly the reduction of car parking spaces and the introduction of more cycle storage
Those are huge public
Definitely,
benefits.
public benefit, yeah. Okay, well, let's proceed to a vote then. The recommendation is to grant. Hamish, Councillor Dorian.
Against, Chair, thank you.
Against. Councillor Evans.
I'm for with conditions.
Yes, in favour, with the addition to
Yes.
condition 9, which I mentioned beforehand, yes. Councillor Spalling.
Yeah, I'm in favour.
In favour. Councillor Duncan.
In favour with the conditions
favour.
discussed.
Yeah, and I'm in favour as well, so that's 4-1 in favour. Right, thank you both very much for your time. We'll now proceed to the next case, which is in the southern pack, Park Cottage in Onslow Square, and Ms. Long, over to you.
Good evening and thank you. The application relates to a flat-roof, single-storey, brick-built garage accessed from Onslow Square. The application seeks planning permission for the conversion of the garage to a HV switch room which would serve Park House. This slide shows the location of the garage in connection to Park House, a residential dwelling to the northwest, together with the proposed internal plans. Externally, the existing sliding timber door will be replaced with a new timber door and no other external changes are proposed. Internally, the floor area of the garage will be lowered by 0.11 metres with a new floor slab and the garage walls will be reinforced with concrete. The excavation works would take place within the root protection area of a lime tree to the rear, with cabling extending towards Park House, also coming within close proximity to root protection areas of a number of trees. The application has been submitted alongside a tree report and proposes an air spade method of excavation to avoid root damage. Condition 3 is recommended to secure further detail of tree protection measures prior to commencement of development. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the recommended conditions in section 10 and the completion of a legal agreement to secure Park House as parking permit free. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we don't have any speakers on this case or indeed any other cases tonight. So straight to questions to officers. Yes, Emma.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify where this garage is, because the second slide I think we saw, it looked like there was a whole row of garages, one of which was going to be used as a substation. And maybe I misinterpreted I haven't been pottering down that little alleyway. So is that, I don't understand what we're looking at here. Is there a row of garages and this is one of them?
Yep, that's correct. So on the slide on the screen right now, you can see that the actual particular garage that is referencing to is surrounded in blue, and the garage is the one that you can see on the image on the bottom left that has the kind of the signage on it.
So are some of, I presume if there's a row of them, some of them are leased to other neighbours. Are they, so this one wouldn't be owned, it's leased, or do they all belong to Park House?
No, they're to different properties. So some of them I know belong to properties on Pelham Crescent, but the only garage that this application relates to is the one that's circled in blue there.
So they're turning a leased garage into a substation. I don't know if there's any precedent for that. It just seems really strange. But aside from that, obviously I've read the objections, and it's obviously people are mystified as to why they're doing this. But if it's going to be substation using lithium batteries, it's really dangerous, and there will probably be other parked cars with it. Just the health and safety aspect of it concerns me. So there are two things, one of which is whether or not they're allowed to do it, which isn't a planning consideration, but the whole health and safety aspect of it. I know we can't really comment on why they're doing it or why they want to do it, that's not our business, but the idea of having such a substation, I'm just concerned about the safety aspect.
Okay, no, that's fine. I can clarify, just to confirm, it is HV switch room. We've changed the description of development and included the compliance statement within one of the approved documents in condition 2. The reason being is to clarify that it is a switch room rather than a substation with a transformer, etc. So it's not the sort of thing that you were talking about there. The plan clearly shows that there wouldn't be any noise surrounding with it. walls have been reinforced with concrete to keep any noise, disturbance, etc., and they have confirmed that they are compliant with the industry standards to ensure that there would be no unacceptable fire risk to any of the surrounding properties.
So I don't understand what a switch room is. What is it?
So a switch room is a particular type of substation where energy is routed either from different sources or to different customers, generally without a transformer, which is the case here.
Okay.
So I'm no expert, but that's...
I'm as
that's
mystified
what
as
I
everybody
understand.
else, but they aren't planning considerations, are they, it seems? Okay, thank you.
So I have a quick question. So there's a lot of trees on the site that need to be worked around, and the various plans they have to ensure those trees aren't damaged. There was some discussion of whether or not an arboriculturalist would need to be present while that work's carried out. Is that something which is conditioned? Could you remind me?
Yes, contained in the addendum report, condition number 3, I believe it is, has been amended to ensure that there are details of a method statement and to ensure that the works are supervised by a competent arborist.
Thank you. Yes, arborist. I couldn't remember the right word. That is reassuring, thank you. And then in terms of noise, there's obviously conditions that it doesn't breach any legal noise levels, and that's, I think it said, ongoing. So if in 2 years' time, maybe they change the equipment or whatever and it does create noise, is that still a planning issue, or does that become a noise enforcement issue?
So yes, obviously the conditions are in place to ensure that there's no unacceptable disturbance to the living conditions of surrounding properties. I would also just reiterate that condition 2 has been amended also to include compliance with the wording. It is a compliance statement plan that they have provided, which shows a plan of what the sort of equipment that is going to be within that unit, and they have confirmed that it's not the sort of equipment that would cause unacceptable noise to surrounding properties.
So we're protecting on noise, and both on the equipment type and more specifically on the acceptable noise level.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. There's no further questions from me. Does anyone else on the committee have questions? No. Okay, in which case let's proceed to a vote. The recommendation is to grant. I'll start from the other end this time. Emma, Councillor Duncan.
Utterly bizarre, but I can't find any reason to refuse it, so I will have to reluctantly support it.
Okay, very good. Councillor Spalling? In favour. Councillor Evans?
Yes, I tend to agree with Councillor Duncan, but since there are no reasons not to support it, I have to support it.
Okay.
Because even in the objections, I've been studying them, and there haven't been any real planning, based in planning objections.
Understood. So in favour?
Yes.
Yeah.
In favour. Thank you.
Councillor Dorian? In favour, and I'm also in favour, so that passes unanimously. So we now move on to 143 Gloucester Road.
The application site comprises a 3-storey terrace building located on the east side of Gloucester Road. The application seeks planning permission for the addition of a timber trellis to the side boundary walls within the rear garden only. The application does not relate to the rear boundary wall, nor does it relate to the pergola or planting. The timber trellis would sit on top of the existing brick boundary wall to either side elevation and would have a height of 0.68 metres on the south-eastern boundary and 0.8 metres to the northwestern boundary. The height of the existing brick wall would remain. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the recommended conditions in section 9, with the addition of a further time limit condition recommended here to secure implementation of the development within 3 years from the date of decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, yes, Malcolm.
Thank you, Chairman. The main objector, the first objector says there's already a 12-foot wall at the rear of the garden. So I looked at the drawings, the elevation drawings, and on the last page, we've got these heights of trellises of 80 centimetres and 68 centimetres attached to the top of walls, but those walls in the elevations don't show any heights. So I then traced back to the two drawings back. This is the one that shows a tree and 3 walls. Well, those are scaled. There's a scale at the bottom of the page. And indeed, the existing elevation back wall is, by that scale, 3.5 metres. That's 13'6". That's a 13'6" wall at the back of the property. And they're suggesting they want to put on top of that a further trellis, but I don't see where that trellis is. On the 2 side walls, the one at the top with the tree, the left-hand side, is already 10 foot. At the lowest, it's stepped up higher. And the right-hand wall is already 6'6". Now, normally I think a garden wall is about 5 feet. So it seems to me this garden has already got vastly disproportionately high walls already. And the objectors seem to be objecting to the height when the trellis is added. They're objecting to loss of light. I just wondered, am I correct in thinking there is a 13'6" rear wall and side wall of 10 foot to which they want to add on the left-hand side a 80 centimetre trellis, which would take it to nearly 4 metres high.
Okay, just to confirm, this application is only to the 2 side walls. There are no changes proposed as part of this application to the rear wall. On the 2 existing side brick walls, there is no increase in height of those. They would remain as is, on top of which would be the 0.65, 0.8 additional trellis. So yes, there is additional height to those side elevations, but it is in a wooden trellis form with open slatted design. So in our view, there wouldn't be any increase in loss of light or any harm to living conditions over and above that of the existing situation on the side boundary walls.
Just finally, Chair, a quick supplementary. Do we normally have to give explicit planning permission for trellises in gardens, or are they just regarded as temporary garden furniture?
In this case, it's relating to the overall height of the boundary wall. On side boundary walls, you could put something up no more than 2 metres without requiring planning permission. Because of the overall height of that, they would need permission for any height on those side boundary walls, and that's why permission has been applied for.
So I'll come to you in one moment, Janet. Could I just clarify very quickly, what is the height of the current height of the side walls?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information in front of me, but it does necessitate the submission of a planning permission because of the overall height.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
By scaling up the scale that's given on the bottom,
Yeah.
the right-hand wall is 2 metres high already at the lowest point,
Yeah.
and the left-hand wall is 3 metres.
Okay.
So they're already quite high walls.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Evans.
Yes, I'm a little confused. It says in the objections that the perception is that it's already up and that it's a retrospective application. So can you explain the position on that, please?
Yes, I can confirm it is not retrospective. I think perhaps the confusion has come from some of the images. I think as part of the landscaping works of the overall site, they have been installing peach trees. So the single-stemmed and providing foliage at the upper level, and that's what the sort of the wooden bit that you can see at the back and some of the images that have come from the neighbouring properties. But that doesn't form part of this application. The only changes are to the side boundary walls, which the trellis is not yet installed on that brick boundary wall, so it is not a retrospective application.
Sorry, one more question. One of the objectors, where is it? Yeah, Tom Cark, 9 Clairville Grove, says that he attached a photo of the, have I seen what he was trying to demonstrate the problem was of the height of the walls. I can't see it in the pack. I don't suppose we have that photo, or maybe said he attached it but forgot to. Or oh, it's in the addendum. Sorry, where is the addendum? Sorry. This one here, is that the, yeah. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Okay, in which case we'll proceed to a vote. The recommendation is to grant. Councillor Duncan?
I can't think of any objection to it, so I reluctantly agree, approve.
Councillor Spalling?
I think I'm against. My reason is that the walls would be disproportionately high.
Okay. Councillor Evans?
I am against, for the same reason.
Councillor Duncan?
For the same reason and the impact on the conservation area.
Okay, well, I'm in favour, but that's irrelevant because it's already voted down 3-2. So we now need to propose a reason. I think the reason I'm hearing, though, as long perhaps you could summarise it better, is to do with predominantly with the sense of enclosure and shading as well, or shadows, yeah.
So just to confirm, sorry, it's not the resultant appearance of it that would harm the conservation area, it's more the impact of the additional height causing impact on living conditions.
Is it that or is it both?
Or is it both?
Would we like to include both reasons? I think we should. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so could we put both reasons in, please?
Okay, and you're happy for officers to draft that?
Okay, thank you. And then we need to propose those reasons. Could you just summarise them very quickly for us so we know what we're proposing?
Yep, so the first reason for refusal is the resultant height of the boundary walls would be out of character with the character and appearance of the surrounding, the building and the surrounding conservation area. The second reason for refusal being, again, the resultant height would cause material harm to living conditions of neighbouring properties in terms of loss of light.
Yep, and could we have a proposer for that, please? Yeah, and a seconder, Hamish, yeah. So it's Councillor Evans proposing and Councillor Duncan seconding. So we now need to vote on that reason. Councillor Duncan?
I'm fine with that, thanks, Chair.
Yeah, in favour. Councillor Spalling in favour. Councillor Evans in favour. Councillor Duncan in favour. And I'm in favour of that reason as well. Right. So we now move on to 7 Bina Gardens. Back to you, Ms. Long.
Okay, so the application, sorry, just bear with me a second. The application site is located on the western side of Bina Gardens. The building is divided into 5 flats and the application relates to a flat at lower ground and ground floor levels. The building has previously been extended to the rear, which included the provision of a balcony with timber decking at ground floor level, granted planning permission in 2002. This can be seen adjacent to the rear building line here. The current application seeks planning permission for the installation of a metal access platform together with the removal of the existing timber balcony and its replacement with a glazed deck on which a conservatory with a sloping roof would be constructed. The conservatory would be glazed with minimal stainless steel framing, and the access platform would not be for use as a terrace. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the recommended conditions in section 9. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? I see. Yes, Malcolm.
I got the point about the condition, because one of the objections is the metal grille, bridge or walkway could be noisy, but it won't be able to be used as a terrace. It's purely for access.
Yes, that's correct. The condition specifically excludes the use of that area as a terrace.
But what did worry me was that the conservatory now, if you look at the second plan drawing, that it seems to totally enclose the central bathroom. So I just wondered what's happening about ventilation in that bathroom.
It's not a habitable room, and that wouldn't be something that we would be in a position to refuse the application on. It is still an openable window, yes, albeit internal, I appreciate that, but again, it's not a habitable room, so it doesn't require natural light and ventilation.
So, I mean, that might be building regulations that require that ventilation, but it's not a planning issue.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
I just have a quick question about materials for the conservatory. Excuse me, so I think they're stainless steel at the moment, is that right?
So they are proposing a stainless steel frame, but a largely glazed structure, so it'll be very minimal framing around it. The proposal, I guess, is to kind of get the light into that space.
And I just wonder, is that introducing a new sort of material and precedent into the into that street in the conservation area? That would we normally require timber for conservatory?
Not necessarily in areas where it is enclosed and it's appropriate. I think the key here, it's a lightweight structure, it's modest, it's an infill of an existing area, it's very subordinate, it allows that the rear elevation of the building to be viewed. I think it's clear that I think the lightweight nature of it in an enclosed area ensures that it would be an acceptable addition in that area.
Okay, and the views onto it are quite minimal.
Exactly, correct. Yeah. It is within an internal light well, that very limited visibility. That's why there's not a lot of images in my this presentation, because it's very difficult to see it from anywhere fundamentally.
Yeah. Understood, thank you. Any other questions? No? Well, let's proceed to a vote then. The recommendation is to grant. Councillor Duncan. Agreed. Councillor Evans?
Agree.
Councillor Spalling? Agreed. Councillor Duncan?
Agreed.
Agreed, and I agree as well, so that's unanimously passed. So, two more cases to go. So, we now move on to the Sandhills on Limerston Street.
Okay, thank you. So the application site comprises a 3-storey block of 30 residential dwellings located on Limerston Street. The application seeks planning permission for the replacement of the existing single-glazed windows and doors with double-glazed UPVC units to the north-facing front elevation here, and also to the south-facing rear elevation. The size of the glazing bars and the form of the windows and doors have been designed to reflect the existing openings. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the recommended conditions in section 9. Thank you.
Questions? Emma?
This is a council application, and the council are romping through all our estates and putting in UPVC windows, which are fantastic, providing insulation and so on, but an utter abomination the frames are much wider, people end up with a lot less light coming in, and also they're highly flammable, and if they do catch fire and they're putting them in kitchens, maybe not here, I'm not sure, possibly, but certainly in some of our estates, it's the worst possible material you could have in your kitchen because you will die from toxic fumes before you reach your door, and I've been told that by the fire brigade. So how do we stop the plague of UPVC romping through the borough? We are really going to regret it in 15 years' time. They don't last, and they look awful. And here we are putting one right, is it in or right next to a conservation area? I know it's a modern building, but that's an excuse. That people are desperate where they're being changed in on our estates, and I don't know, how can we stop this? Because I truly think they're abomination in so many ways, and I've got huge concerns for it. Is there anything in as a planning consideration that we can prevent? Is it wood? I can't remember what they're replacing now. Sorry, whether it's metal or wood, being turned into toxic, ugly UPVC, albeit beautifully insulated for now.
Okay, just to take a number of points there. First point, I can confirm it's not located within a conservation area. Appreciate what you're saying. We have to consider each application as it's submitted to us in accordance with our relevant development plan policies. As set out in the officer report, the issues that we can take into consideration here are whether the appearance of the replacement openings are acceptable. In this case, as I've said, they've looked to replicate glazing bars and keep the form of the windows the same. There are already some existing examples of UPVC windows in this building. And the second consideration we can have is the impact on living conditions. In this case, they're replacing existing openings, so therefore there will be no increase in any harm to any living conditions of surrounding properties. So they're the two considerations that we would have as part of an application, and on that basis the recommendation is for approval.
Could I just clarify very quickly, do they face directly onto a conservation area, the Sloane Stanley Conservation Area?
So if you look on the site plan included within your committee pack, you can see that the conservation area is sort of shaded in green, and it's immediately opposite the application site, yes, for about half of it. The top north part of Lumsden Street on its southwestern side is not in a conservation area, but it does extend further. But once you get further down Lumsden Street, the other side is, yes, a conservation area.
Okay, sorry, I can't find the image in the pack. It's not this one, is it?
No, if you go to the very start of the report.
Right. Oh, the very start, yeah.
So I don't think it has a page number.
Yeah, I see it. So if we were talking about an application in a conservation area, the changing of timber windows to UPVC, is that normally something we would resist?
Generally, you will see that where in the conservation areas, we request that timber frame windows are replaced with timber frame windows, but each application is considered on its merits at the time of submission. And again, I think I would highlight that yes, the existing openings are largely timber, but there are existing examples of UPVC within that building, so it wouldn't be a totally out of keeping character. And I think, as I said, they've tried to design it in such a way that visually the glazing bars and the form of the openings would be retained.
And sorry, one more question. There are presumably options for window materials and designs, potentially timber, which provide the same insulation benefits as UPVC. It's not that we have to choose, or an applicant has to choose between insulation and material appearance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the exact details to be able to advise in terms of the exact specifications. There may well be, but obviously what's before you today is the PVC option that they're looking to progress with at the site.
Yeah.
It is cheaper. I mean, we've been going through this at Swinbrook Estate, sorry to interrupt. Swinbrook Estate, which is a beautifully designed estate, architect designed estate, and there are a lot of leaseholders there are up in arms about it, and they've been doing research on it. Obviously, some of them have actually put in double glazed wooden frames out of their own pockets, and now they're being told they've got to have UPVC. They're not very happy at all. But UPVC, it's plastic, it's cheaper. It's, you know, there are alternatives. I just think we have to stop the plague. I really do. They don't look good. They cut out a lot of light. I know it's more expensive to use wood, but, you know, wood lasts for, you know, I've got wooden windows 130 years old in my place, and they do last if they're properly looked after. UPVC will not last. It's a waste of money. It is right opposite a conservation area. Yeah. It's right in the middle of a conservation area, and I think it's a huge mistake. We can't allow this throughout the whole borough. I think we will so regret it in years to come.
Yeah, I think we do generally need to make it easier for people to upgrade their windows to double and triple glazing, but I do share a lot of your concerns around UPVC because it's not generally an attractive material and doesn't sort of contribute to the borough. Yes, Councillor Spalling, and then Councillor Evans after that.
Chairman, I've actually done this on a building, on a 6-storey building in a conservation area, and we did replace all the front windows with wood frame double glazing. It is possible to have them custom made. They are expensive. They're 3 times the cost of PVC. But, you know, all the major firms, Everest and Anglian, will make them to order in wood, effective double glazing. The trade-off was, if we did that on the front of the building, the pre-app advice was the planning officer would allow us to do PVC at the rear of the building, which faced the railway line. And that's what we did. So the public benefit was at the front preserving the conservation area, and at the back was the heat efficiency. But you see, I could be persuaded on this one if the report was more persuasive. So I don't want to be critical, but both the elevation drawings we've got show proposed. So we've got nothing to compare it with. I don't know if all these proposed elevations look better or worse than the existing. And secondly, I think the report's a bit too eager. It's 6.4. It says, nevertheless, the introduction of the PVC would continue. Well, we know there's a couple of windows that have already been changed, would continue to preserve the original character of the building and would complement the surrounding area. Well, I can't tell because I haven't got any existing drawings. And this is facing a conservation area, and that's where I was obliged to have wood specially made. So I'm torn between being able to be persuaded, but I'm not sure the report does persuade me. The other thing that might persuade me is, of course, is the cost aspect, and it's a council property. So I'm just torn between the two.
Yeah, well, I think there's also around the cost, potentially need to know. One would have to look into the long-term costs. As Councillor Duncan was saying, that UPVC doesn't have a great reputation for its long-term quality and can also look worse over time, which I think is a valid consideration as well. Okay, sorry, yes, Janet.
It is interesting that there are no objectors, and that, well, of course, it's a council proposal, but there is one supporter who supports it on that it's an environmentally friendly solution to insulating the houses. And I thought that was interesting. But having said that, I do think in an application like this, we need photographs. We need to see what the material looks like and what, as the drawings are not adequate for us to make any decision on this. It's a big decision to put PVC in that area across from a conservation, and we have to have more materials, more, I think, in the application.
Okay, well, no, I think that's a fair point, and yeah, no, I certainly have reservations about even if there is some already, to introduce a lot more UVPC onto that street, which faces a conservation area, and regardless is part of our borough. I have reservations about that. Anyway, I think we should probably proceed to a vote. The recommendation is to grant, can't remember which way I did it last time, but start with Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, plastic is not environmentally friendly, Chair. Absolutely refuse.
Against. Yeah. Councillor Spalling. Against. Councillor Evans.
I think that we have to refuse. I think that we need an application that's more substantial in order to make a decision. So thank you.
Against. Councillor Durian. Okay, against, and I will vote against as well. So that's unanimous. We now need to vote on a reason. So, Alison, could you summarise I think we're all of a sort of similar mind, the impact, particularly aesthetically, on the conservation area, as well, on the borough and on the conservation area opposite. Could you summarise that for us, please?
Yep, so from what I'm hearing, it's the introduction of UPVC would introduce a material that is out of keeping with the building and the surrounding area, and therefore would have a harmful impact on the appearance of the building.
Yep, and
Chair,
appearance of the building and the conservation area opposite. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to, sorry to interrupt you. Can we say something about, because they are claiming that it's environmentally friendly, but given the duration of your PVC frames, it's not. So I think we should, can we challenge that somehow? Because it's stated as if it's a fact, and manufacturers claim it lasts like 35 years or something. It actually doesn't even last that long. So, 15 years is the usual thing. It's not environmentally friendly. It's plastic anyway. But it's not environmentally friendly. So if we can challenge that somehow, I don't know how you do that.
Either it could be in the reason, or maybe we just record that in the minutes. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's perhaps best to record it in the minutes rather than include it within the reason for refusal, because as we discussed earlier on, that the scope of the assessment of the application is based on the appearance and the living conditions.
So we'll record those concerns in the minutes, and we'll vote on the reason as you've already stated. In terms of the effect of the appearance of the material. So could we please have a proposer for that reason? Yes, Councillor Duncan, a seconder. Councillor Evans. So in favour of that, sort of voting on that reason, Councillor Duncan.
Agreed.
Agreed, Councillor Spalling. Agreed, Councillor Evans. Agreed, Councillor Durian. Agreed, and I agree as well. So we now move on to our final case. I think Councillor Spalding's recusing himself from this case. 38 to 40 Pennywern Road. Back over to you.
Thank you. The application site comprises two 5-storey mid-terrace properties located on the northwestern side of Pennywern Road. The building is in use as a house of multiple occupation with 2 self-contained residential units within the mansard extension granted planning permission in 2018. To the rear, the application seeks retrospective planning permission for an infill extension at ground and first floor levels to 40 Pennywern Road, together with the replacement of all windows and the introduction of 4 roof lights and low-level glazing to the lower ground floor level. The infill extension, you can see on this plan here hopefully, matches the height of the existing rear extension to number 38. Internally, the lawful HMO use is retained with a reconfiguration of the 2 self-contained residential units within the mansard. There will be no loss or additional residential units. This slide shows the previous as approved rear elevation and the proposals which form part of the current application, showing the rear extension and windows alongside images of the rear. So the existing at the top and the current situation below on the images. To the front elevation, the application relates to the addition of bottle balustrading to the front porch and repainting. The alterations to the lower ground floor openings no longer form part of this application. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the recommended conditions in section 9. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Well, I might start off with the questions. I have a couple. So the bottle balustrades on the front is obviously different to what was there before, but the reason the report doesn't object to that is because there's a number of different styles, including bottle balustrades already on the street. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There is a variation in the form of bottle balustrading or lack of within the street. So therefore the introduction of bottle balustradings will be in keeping with the overall character of the street.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of the architectural detail on the rear, do we have an image of that? Because there were concerns that that wasn't in keeping with the conservation area.
Yeah, so as you can see in the image, there's been a lot of piecemeal additions and alterations to that rear elevation. The proposal brings greater uniformity, replacing the windows, again, timber framed, white painted, improving the overall appearance of that rear elevation.
So even if it's not, maybe slightly unusual for the conservation area, we're saying it because it improves what's currently there, it's therefore acceptable.
Yeah, the conclusion that officers have made is that the proposal would preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area. It would introduce a modest infill extension and would rationalise the rear elevation of the building.
Okay. And then, sorry, one more question. One of the objectors raised an issue of daylight and how the development cast more of a shadow over, I assume, her garden, patio. Has an assessment done of that, additional shadows over the neighbour's patio?
Yes, so the infill extension was to number 40 at ground and first floor level. It was an infill extension, and the height of the overall extension wouldn't increase that of that it currently exists to number 38, I believe. So therefore, it's concluded that there wouldn't be any material loss of light over and above that of the existing situation at the site.
Okay. Okay, that answers that question. Sorry, one more, one more question. The development of the garden, is it setting a new precedent in the amount of, because even though it's improving visually, we're saying the rear of the site, it does develop more of the garden. Is that setting a new precedent in the area, or is that something which we already see on that?
So the actual, as I said, the extent of extensions to the rear is that ground and first floor rear extension to number 40. It's infill extension to match the height of the adjoining property. So the officer's conclusion is it would be in keeping with the rhythm within the building and the wider terrace. It wouldn't result in an unacceptable increase in massing to the rear of that elevation.
Okay, so it's matching the adjoining property.
So the height, I don't know if it's helpful for me to go back to the images.
Please do,
so
please do.
So you can see on this image, on the top existing image, there is an existing ground and first floor extension to number 38. And does my cursor work on this? This kind of side, this infill bit here is where the extension would be coming, and it would be no higher than that which is currently at the rear of the property.
Okay, I see. And the bit at sort of ground floor level, is that coming out further than what's currently there? Or
So the infill extension is at ground and first floor level of number 40.
Yes, on the bottom photo, sorry, that thing which looks like it might be a lower ground floor.
So that's in the lower ground. So this application only relates to these low-level low-level openings, not the extension.
Not the extent it goes into the garden?
That's correct,
okay.
yeah.
Understood. And then there's just one final point I had. Sorry, I'll get through and then I'll hand over to colleagues if they have any questions. Could we not... could we just make I've forgotten the term, a note, not a condition, one less than a condition,
Informative.
Informative, yes, and just an informative to write to the developer and remind them that it's much preferred that they apply for this in advance rather than retrospectively.
Yes, we could add a condition advising that the application should be sought prior to any development work at the site.
Yeah.
Informative, sorry, yes.
Informative, yeah. Thank you very much. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, in which case we proceed to a vote. The recommendation is to grant. Councillor Duncan. Against. Councillor Evans.
I'm going to have to abstain on this one.
Abstain.
Yes.
Councillor Duncan.
I'm also tortured. I'm going to abstain along with Councillor Evans.
Right. I'm going to vote in favour, which means it's 1 for, 1 against, 2 abstentions. And I think the chair's vote in this is a tiebreaker, isn't it? Okay, so the application passes. Okay, well that brings us to the end of tonight's proceedings. Thank you all very much. Have a very good evening and very good Christmas.
Thank you, officers.
Full council
Thank
before.
you,
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah. Thank you.